Thank you. It is an incredible honor to accept this award on behalf of the broad and diverse coalition of legal service providers that is ICARE. It's a remarkable alliance of friends, colleagues, and peers in this fight. You know, the other day, a colleague of mine asked me about why I became an immigration attorney. She was looking for career advice for her daughter. You see, I grew up in a family divided by borders. My father's was on the Mexican side, and my mom's was on the American side. But when I really sit back and think about why I'm an immigration lawyer, I think it has a lot to do with being gay. When I was growing up, it wasn't always easy going to public school in Georgia, having feminine interests, not being into sports. And I don't even think I really consciously connected to being gay when I was a kid. But I knew I was different. And I knew that in order to be myself, I had to be somewhere else. So all I had to do to get there was apply to a school in New York, get a scholarship, buy a plane ticket. But I sure as hell had to cross a lot of borders to get here, right? I mean, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Maryland. So when I sit across the table from a child I'm representing, I see a person trying to be the best version of themselves that they can be, trying to escape a reality that could kill them, either emotionally and spiritually, or even literally. After I graduated from NYU Law in 2013, I started my career as an immigration attorney at The Door, a long-term Robin Hood community partner. Yeah. The fellowship there gave me some freedom to focus on the work that I wanted to, and so I chose to work with kids who were trapped in deportation proceedings. It was the high-stakes nature of it that really appealed to me. And it was only an 18-month fellowship, so I wanted to work as hard as I could. I quickly found myself with over 100 cases, and not long into the fellowship, a crisis emerged. Unprecedented numbers of children, tens of thousands, were fleeing Central America and coming to the United States alone. The government took a very aggressive stance in the crisis, fast-tracking all of these kids for deportation hearings. We used to call this practice of fast-track deportations rocket dockets. You see, in immigration court, you have no right to an attorney. You could be 5 years old, don't speak any English, and you're left to defend yourself alone. So for the government, the rocket dockets would be an efficient way to address the crisis, moving to deport kids who didn't have lawyers and couldn't mount their own defense. It was a massive machine, pushing vulnerable kids with no representation out of the country. I was the only lawyer at The Door who was working on deportation cases because back then there was no funding for that type of work. So I spoke to my supervisor at the time, Eve Stotland, who was the director of legal services there, about what we could do. We thought if we could just throw ourselves into the gears of this massive deportation machine, then maybe we could slow it down a little bit. We got in touch with the other nonprofit legal providers that we knew and had seen on the juvenile dockets in immigration court, and we met in the Legal Aid Society's offices on Water Street. I remember it felt like our war room. We shared ideas, best practices, ways to fight back. Kathleen Maloney, an attorney with Legal Aid at the time, came up with the name ICARE, which stood for Immigrant Children Advocates Relief Effort. And then with a name, collaboration, and an urgent mission, we put out the word in the legal, philanthropic, and social service sectors that we needed help. And we were overwhelmed with the response. Thank you. People showed up. Law students signed up. Lawyers volunteered. Law firms sent their first and second year associates who spoke Spanish and needed their pro bono hours. We would go to the courthouse together whenever there was a juvenile docket, ask every single child on the way in if she had an attorney, and for the vast majority, the answer was no. But together, we stood with those children before the judge, and we told him that the child he was preparing to deport actually had a claim for humanitarian protection. The only thing stopping that child from winning that claim was that there weren't enough lawyers and there wasn't enough funding. But that's where Robin Hood stepped in and filled the breach. Joining forces with the City Council and the New York Community Trust, Robin Hood used both the power of its purse and its convening power to help design and scale ICARE, creating a force that could meet this machine. And we did it. We fought for every single child who was unaccompanied in immigration court. But amidst the good days, there are some very hard days that go with this work. One of my hardest cases involved a boy who'd been arrested for dealing drugs and faced deportation to Jamaica. Because of his criminal record, he was ineligible for asylum. I had his case for over a year. About 9 months in, he was assaulted in immigration detention. Someone knocked out his tooth. He called me and he said, "I can't be here anymore. I just want to be deported." I told him, "I'll do whatever it is that you want me to do, but we have a hearing in a month and I think we can win this. Do you want to hold on?" And he said, "Okay, I'll do it. I trust you." As I worked with him, and as I learned his story, I saw how no one had really been kind to him in his entire life. It would be so easy to look at him and label him a bad immigrant. But then you hear about the time that his father kicked him in the face and he fell down the stairs. Or how his grandfather attacked him with a machete and threw him out of the house and onto the streets. You learn where the scars are from. You see how his back was pushed so tightly against the wall, and you can't even imagine what you would have done in his place. So many of the children that I work with have been facing very adult decisions and very adult pressures for a very long time. I've come to realize that some people have never been given the opportunity to hear their story as a narrative of hope, victory, or success. That's what advocating for someone in immigration court is about. After my fellowship at the door, and as I moved through my career, I remained so proud of the work that we had done in 2014 to meet that crisis and create ICARE. Last year, I returned to the ICARE community as the director of the Unaccompanied Minors program at Catholic Charities, leading a team of over 40 legal and social service workers. It was January 2018, and one of the first things I heard from my team of paralegals was that they were seeing a lot more kids who were separated from their family at the border. "It's the saddest thing in the world," I remember them saying. They're so upset. They cling onto us like we're their parents. When I was a child, I learned to read with a book called "Are You My Mother?" It's about a baby bird who hatches while his mother's away from the nest. And too small to fly, he walks around asking every animal he meets if they're his mother. He has no idea what she looks like. I remember my mom reading this story to me when I was little and walking along the adventure with the baby bird. At the climax of the story, he meets a big, scary machine. The book calls it a snort. Not knowing any better, he thinks the machine could be his mother. He runs up to it, excited, and instead it scoops him up and traps him. I thought about that story a lot last summer as we met young children separated from their parents, asking us about their mothers. Mothers who were called criminals and arrested for seeking asylum. The latest version of the bad immigrant. We had to throw ourselves into the gears of the machine again. There was no blueprint for how to represent a separated child. But there was ICARE, and there was Robin Hood. There was a network of committed professionals who knew how to mobilize. And we did mobilize, reuniting families where we could, but always keeping our focus on the rights of our client, the child. The legal and social service professionals of ICARE, those are the real heroes. They met with hundreds of children who'd been separated from their parents. Some of them were less than a year old. For many, the immigration attorney or social worker they met was the first person in the United States who was there to help them. This work is high stakes on a slow day. I watched my team feeling like the world had descended and depended on them at the same time, and we were under a level of attention and scrutiny that I had never seen or experienced. But ICARE stood up and made sure that every child that was separated from their parents in New York was represented by an attorney. This story has many important lessons. It's a reminder that we must erase the false idea of the good immigrant and the bad immigrant. Our clients, all of them, are human beings. They've lived full, complicated, varied lives, just like you. It's a lesson that addressing one crisis can prepare us for the next one that we couldn't have ever predicted. And it's a lesson that our ability to make a difference exists when we come together, when we value and leverage our unique skills and perspectives to meet a machine. A machine that's still turning. As I stand here, families are being separated and detained. Hope is being criminalized. ICARE's work continues. Thank you to Robin Hood for being such a key part of that. And thank all of you for making that possible.